Well, look, I tell you what I did. I wrote a whole world of notes after watching every single one of your videos.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I know. Can we cover that side of things?
Yeah, we can. We can touch on that.
All right.
Oh man, you did your homework, Tim.
Visual Fox 2. Visual Fox 2 kill. Ninja out. 0.
All right, welcome back to Fast Ship Performance. My name is Tim Davies, and I'm with a guest today that I found online, and he's a very interesting guy. So I thought I'd drag him on the podcast to bring us some truth bombs in here for the community. His name is Miki Mclauraine. Have I pronounced that right?
Yeah, that's about right. Mclaren.
Mclaren, brilliant. Look, I'm just going to let you talk about your background because I found you in a group online, and it was about making the choice of stopping drinking or not, stopping drinking alcohol. And I go through this the whole time. I took a year off back in 2017. A lot of guys in the military, coming out of the military, a lot of veterans in the UK have problems with alcohol. So I'm in that group. You're in that group too. And then I watched one of your videos about, I think you were 3 months clear. And I was like, that guy's speaking some truth here. And then I went and consumed all your videos. And that's why I dragged you on the podcast, kicking and screaming. So should we talk a little bit about, what you're doing now, your background, where you're living, and should we start with that?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, I hope you didn't have too much trouble dragging me in here. I try not to resist too much,
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from a small island in the Caribbean. It's called St. Lucia.
Yeah.
It seems to be becoming a bit more popular as a vacation spot and a tourist kind of spot. So but there are times when I mention it where people are like, where? They're not sure where I'm talking about. So it's one of the lesser known islands. I lived there for about 7 years, and we came over to the U.S., my parents and me, and 5 of my siblings. Well, anyway, to get to the interesting stuff, I graduated high school and just kind of mucked about for a little bit. I didn't have too much direction. I had to figure out a lot of things on my own. I had to do a lot of self-parenting, a lot of things I might have been taught as a youngster. I had to learn the hard way. And the hard way by making mistakes, a lot of mistakes. And so some of the things you heard me talking about are born of an immense amount of errors and just me learning from those errors and talking about them. So about 2010 or so, I joined the military. I've been in for about 10 years. And I speak because the videos I make and the podcast I'm trying to start, it's more or less under the assumption that a lot of the things that I face, a lot of the issues that I face are universal. And I hope in working them out myself that maybe, I could help some people out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We talk a lot about on the podcast here about failing, and we call it first attempt in learning, as in FAIL. And I always say to people, because I was teaching pilots for a long time in the military. I taught for about 10 years on jets. And we'd have to have people come to the flight school having failed already. And if they hadn't failed already, it was a real problem for us because, of course, it's the first time they fail. If they're in a single seat jet over North Syria or something, trying to tank, at night in cloud, and then they start failing, they don't know how to recover from that. So for us, the whole journey in the military was about failing forward. If that makes sense. You fail and you move on. Now, you had, is it 5 brothers and a sister? It was 4 brothers and a sister.
It's 4 brothers and a sister, and there's another gentleman. We grew up together, and we were so close. He kind of became my adopted brother.
Oh, okay. So, and you all lived together. Where did you grow up then?
We all grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
I lived in New York for about 20 years, and I saw a lot of things. It was a difficult upbringing for me, particularly because I never really felt as if I fit in. I had a prevailing sense of being out of place almost the entire 2 decades that I was there, and for other reasons it was difficult as well. Some of the stereotypical things you've probably heard about New York, very everyone's in a hurry, people are rude, and crime and all these sorts of things. I saw a lot of that.
Were you quite angry out of interest when you were sort of growing up? Was there an anger issue with you at all? It can be just quite common. That's all. I was reading a lot about when people feel out of place or not accepted or not good enough, then they can manifest an anger from that. Was that something do you remember that at all? Or?
In my adolescence, not as much. It was just sort of a prevailing feeling of awkwardness.
Yeah.
Of just not being quite in the right frequency of thought or
Yeah.
surroundings. I felt that even when I couldn't express it, and I still have trouble pinning it down exactly what it was today. The anger actually started later on, maybe in my mid-20s. I started to notice certain things around me, the people and the way they behaved, and certain things that their priorities I felt were really askew.
Okay.
And I didn't feel like it was an accident. I felt like in some ways it seemed purposeful, and that upset me.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, actually. I think there's people that probably you and I both follow online and probably have read about or watched some videos of you who talk a lot about this, and I want to get into that a little bit later. You're on one of your videos, and the reason I go back to your videos, obviously, because I've written a lot down about them, but you do say,
Awesome.
yeah, so it's going to come back out of you now, isn't it? You do say, actually, on one of them, that your wife listens to your ravings, and
Yes.
so you're trying to find somewhere else where you can put those ideas out there. And it's also like when if I do one of these solo ones, I can do solo podcasts. A lot of it is me thinking as I'm speaking, and that's
Okay.
why we shouldn't be repressing free speech, because if we do that, then we also repress thought by repressing the speech. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So, but in the UK, we have hate speech laws over here, which I disagree with, because I feel, where do you end with hate speech laws? You can just add another community in there, another whatever it might be, and before you know it, you can't speak about anything. But I can hear that in your videos when you're talking. I can hear that and I think sometimes you say, I don't know where I'm going with that, or I've gone a bit off here on a tangent, and I can see you're exploring these ideas in the same way I do, in the same way that I think a lot of men are exploring them at the moment. Are there people that you're reading out there and stuff where you're thinking that's helping me kind of come to some kind of conclusions about my purpose and my identity or anything?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Wow, where do I begin with that? A lot of the change has come through reading, and that's something that's actually that's really integral to self growth. And I think anyone looking to grow needs to entertain ideas that are outside of their norm.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to do that is to plunge into the mind of someone else through a book. Go ahead and take a ride in that person's universe and see where they're coming from, and try to be open-minded. If you just stick to your own ideas, it's kind of, you have this incestuous pool of ideas that are all piling up on each other in your little universe, and you don't grow as a person when you do that. So to answer your question, I've read so much about history. I've read Sheikh Anta Diop, the African origins of civilization,
Sure.
and I've read some stuff from Herodotus and just his travels and how he documented places that he had been and how he'd seen. I think for a lot of people, he's kind of the authority on ancient history in some ways. And but most recently, I can't remember the author's name, but it's How to Be the Way of the Superior Man.
Oh, I know that guy, David Dega.
David Dida, isn't it?
Dida, David Dida. He gets a bit kind of towards the end there. He gets quite deep into sexuality and stuff, doesn't he?
He does. He really does. Yeah. And oddly enough, I learned a lot about women by reading David Dida's book.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
didn't expect that much. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You touched on Jordan Peterson in something you wrote, and actually, I did visit Jordan for a little while. I don't mean visited in person.
Yeah.
I read his stuff, right? And a lot of what he said stuck with me. And something he said in particular, I actually have I'll show you. Sometimes when I'm really touched by something, or I think something is particularly poignant, I'll write it down on my door.
Yeah.
And so I had this door full of scribbles on it.
That's awesome.
That I wanted to show you.
So you're not using a phone or anything. You're not writing on a phone. You're doing a physical thing with it. You're literally physically putting that.
It's Tim. It's everywhere, man. It's. Oh, I don't know if you could see that.
Yeah, we see that. That's amazing. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you're writing things on a door with pen, and then you can stand there in front of them and read them again.
Yeah, I just happen to glance at them sometimes. On there, it says, "Treat yourself as someone who you are responsible for helping," and I think that's one of Jordan Peterson's.
It's one of his rules.
Quotes.
One of his 12 rules, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important for personal growth, because you really do have to step out of yourself sometimes and look at yourself as an unruly. Maybe you're behaving like an unruly teen. Maybe you're letting your emotions run away with you. You've got to step out and look at your behavior from a dispassionate point of view sometimes, and try to cull yourself, kind of maneuver yourself into the right direction. There's no one really better to do that than you. And that's what that one means to me there. So,
well, there's a lot to cover in that. I remember you saying you want to be the best version of yourself, which I thought was was a very interesting thing to say when you're looking at all your videos. Not only one of the things you did say actually was quite interesting. I watched the one about the four. So I'm a big fan of like not hitting the gym and lifting the massive weights and stuff because no one's ever going to measure that. And I was always like, so what if I can lift this? And it doesn't. What does it mean? But what it does mean is what I can think, and I'll need a body healthy enough to be able to think, right? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that in one of your videos about because you do the 4 exercises. I think you said pull up, push up, or dips, squats, and then obviously a bit of cardio. We've got to throw that in there. And that was quite interesting. But you actually talk a lot about the mind in there as well. You're like, I want to grow the body, and all I'm doing is enough to keep me healthy for my family because I'm just I think the quote you read here was, you wrote here was, you want to be not trying to break records, but you're just a guy with a job and a family trying to be healthy for them. I thought that was a really interesting thing because it goes against the grain of what we're told on Instagram and Facebook, everything we're reading on social at the moment. All these filtered models, literally, that are throwing content out there with their millions of followers, and people are liking them and they're hitting the screen like, and you're like, why are you doing this and not doing something for yourself? Why are you not trying to further your mind or your body? Let's try and explore that a little bit. So obviously the reading. There's no end to that, by the way, is there? If you just go down this, not a rabbit hole, but if you just start reading and investigating other people's minds, it just goes on and the growth is exponential. Is there somewhere you're trying to get to, or what happens with that?
As far as my personal development, you mean? Or
yeah, there's no end state, is there? But is there something obviously I run a course and we talk about self-actualization quite a lot. So, because obviously Socrates said, all human philosophy can be distilled down to 2 words, and that was know yourself. That's all we're trying to do in the whole world, is to know ourselves, and no one knows us. You covered it in one of your videos as well, and I watched that. I'm like, that is right on. No one knows who we are. We don't know who they are, and we're fine with that, but we are all trying to understand who we are. That's all we're trying to do by all this reading, all this listening, all us being on a podcast right now and everything else, just trying to work out a bit deeper, another layer of who we might be. Is that where you're trying to get to, is like a self-actualized state?
Yes, actually, it's funny. I didn't know Socrates said that. That used to be written on in ancient Egypt in certain houses of teaching. That was actually a logo that was written out in the Medu Neter hieroglyphics on the door, above the doors. It would say, "Man, know thyself."
Really?
Coincidentally, also that's one of the books I read is "Man, know thyself." And if you don't, everyone has to be somewhat of a student of history. You have to kind of know. You have to know who you are, where you came from. If you're going to have direction, you need to have a base. If you just walked in on a chess game and the 2 participants were midway through, it would be really hard to ascertain what each individual's plan is. But if you saw it from the beginning, you would have a much better idea what each guy is trying to accomplish. And life, what is life but a chess game? It's a chess game. You're in it for a long time, and you need to know what moves were made before you came online, so to speak.
Sure.
I think we all had this kind of gestation period where we were just kind of doing things and we weren't really thinking about what our direction is. So that's of utmost importance to me. Oh, Sam, I realized I didn't plug my channel at all.
No, go on.
Yeah, sorry. My YouTube channel is called Son of Sotep, which is SUN of Sotep, SOTEP.
Yeah.
And I've actually created the first episode of my podcast, but it's still pending.
Okay.
But whenever it is available, it will be called the same thing, Son of Sotep. I've changed the name recently, so it might be a little bit different from when you last visited it.
That's an Egyptian. Is that comes from Sotep? I'm a little bit stuck on that one. Is that an Egyptian history name?
It is. It's Sotepenra. Used to be right. It used to be a title of Egyptian royalty. Certain kings had it as a title, and it means one who is chosen, or one who is chosen by the sun.
By the sun, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I looked this up, by the way. It takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds for the sun's light to get to the earth.
Oh, did you? Thank you for that.
No worries. You said that. You're like, I don't know. Does it take like a second or a minute? It must be more than that. I was like, right, we're going to find this out. Yeah, it does.
Right. Yeah.
That was at the speed of light. So you can work out a distance there as well. But 8 minutes and 20 seconds. But you're right. If the sun is not there anymore, then what happens to the planet? And that's why the sun is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, right. But there was a second part to what you asked me, and I lost it just a little bit. What was the?
We were talking about self-actualization, pretty much where you're trying to get to with the reading that you're doing. Obviously, you're creating the physical balance for all the working out, but it's I'm interested in that part.
So to touch on that, Tim, I just think we're too, like you mentioned, the Instagram models and a lot of the media. I think we're too focused on the carnal. We're too focused on the physical.
Yeah.
And if, by all means, if you're a professional athlete, if you've got to pose it on stage in a week or two, or you've got a game, obviously focus on the physical, because it's what's going to put food in your table. It's what's going to engender your success in life. But for the rest of us, I think we're entirely too focused on an appearance and the physical. And there's too much attention being paid to that. And like you mentioned, how much can you bench, or how fast can you run a 50-yard dash? No one's going to give a damn about that. Can I use like certain language?
Yeah, of course, can you still on? Yes, fine, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Right.
No one's gonna give a shit about that stuff. At the end of your funeral, when people come to speak of you, no one's gonna mention how much they saw you squat or deadlift. It's not gonna be what's important. It's gonna be how you touch people, how you affect them. And so I developed my body now, and I mean, I'm not judging anyone, because I went through a whole evolution of thought with this. At first, I was very focused on the physical. I was trying to get the chicks, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sun's out, guns out, and all of that. But eventually it evolved, and I realized that, the body's a vehicle, and I need to take care of it. It's a gift. The body is a precious, precious gift. There's nothing that you'll ever own that even compares even anywhere near to the complexity and the beauty of the human body. Even just if you take a cross section of the human hand, you see all the tendons and the small bones and the ligaments and how it works, and the eyes. It's absolutely magical. It's just that there's 7 billion of us, so it seems commonplace. But the human body is an absolute miracle. And just our hands are the greatest tools in all of the invention. There's nothing, not your car, not your home, anything can compare to it. And we need to take care of it and appreciate it. It's a gift. It's a wonderful gift. Even a partially functional body is an incredible gift. And we need to appreciate it and respect it. And that ties into all the reasons, all of the things I'm trying to quit or begin, which I think are good for me. And so the body deserves its due, but the mind is what really matters, I believe, at the end of the day. And that's why I say what I say about, don't do all of these exercises that will take you 3-4 hours of gym time. Do the general things, do the squats, the pull-ups, the deadlifts, and get the body moving and active. But bring it back to the mind, develop your mind, broaden your horizons. Your mind is the most powerful tool you'll ever have. And that's what I think deserves the bulk of our attention. And we need to start admiring people who've done that, and not so much these Instagram models and these other, some of them are very shallow individuals and, don't have a whole lot more to contribute than their physicality. Yeah. I think we need to turn that around as a society. Honestly, I really do. And that's what I was touching on there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Don't get me wrong. It's, one of the things I talk about with the group I run for men, and we have classes of 6, and we go through 12 weeks online with these guys. The first thing we do is we talk about sanctuary, which is giving these men their own time in the day where there's no family, no pets, nothing around. It's for them, they're planning. And part of that sanctuary, the first part is spirituality, where we either talk about meditation or mindfulness, or just breathing techniques, where you've got 5 minutes just breathing techniques, and you're by yourself, you're either in your conservatory or you're out in your garden or in a bit of nature. And then we talk about activity. And that is the sort of thing that I'm talking about with these guys. I'm like, whilst the coffee is boiling, or the kettle's boiling, just get some squats done, get a few press ups done, get some stretching done, get some movement done. That's the main thing. And then we cover nutrition planning and a bit of commitments for the day. That's the first 4 letters of sanctuary. And that just gives those guys that maybe 20 or 30 minutes in the morning before anyone else is awake for them to kind of go, right, how am I going to win this day? What do I need to achieve this day? I've woken the body up now. I've woken the mind up now. And now I can go out and I can attack that. But it's unfortunately, that's not the world we're living in. We're not living in that world, unfortunately. And I was going to touch on your politics at some point, because our politics seems to be going the same way. There seems to be, if I come back first, something that you've been saying, something about your history or your racist history with slave names, I found fascinating. I really, really did. And I was really into that. I did some reading around that as well. There seems to be a much bigger divide between, the white community and then ethnic minorities within, say, America, or I could say African Americans or whatever it might be. In the UK, that doesn't really exist. And it's not just me saying it, by the way. You go to London, and London is the most diverse city in the world. And so we're all used to it, and a lot of these people are British, born in the UK. We don't have everyone talks about problems with Muslims and stuff. That is not a thing. It's just not. It's not a thing at all. British Muslims in the UK, they are British. They're contributing towards the economy. And so like what we see coming out from America might be very different from what is in America. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know where you live. Where are you living, or where are you based at the moment? Is it?
Right now I'm in Virginia.
Virginia,
and I
okay.
have been. Yeah, I have been for the last decade, just about.
So the house you're in now is the house you bought that you spoke about in one of your videos. Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, oops. Yes, actually, I'm at home right now, and I bought that house in Virginia, my first home.
Yeah.
Very proud moment for me, especially coming from such humble backgrounds. You know?
Yeah. That'd be same.
But yeah, the media in America sensationalizes a lot, and it's the opinion. I mean, surprise, right?
Yeah.
So it's we're all accustomed to that here in the U.S. The trust is falling where the media is concerned. People are moving away from it more and more. They seem to have an agenda, and most people you talk to, myself or anyone else, will express that to some degree, that they feel as if the media is trying to steer public sentiment one way or another at almost all times. Being unbiased, I don't know. It might actually be a thing of the past, if it ever was.
Yeah.
But as far as race and the sentiments of that, to be honest with you, Tim, like I'm in the military, and obviously, you meet people from all walks of life. Actually, you see that there's kind of an elephant, kind of a carving right there. That's a friend. Yeah, a friend of mine from Nigeria got me that, and I have other things all around my home that I gotten from different friends, China, Japan, and all sorts of places.
Yeah.
Well, we come together and we work, and it's an afterthought. No one is really concerned about race. When we're in that setting, the divide that you mentioned, it seems to be, at least from one man's point of view, to be between those who are affluent, well off, and those who aren't. I think that's the most prominent divide that there is, as opposed to race.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah. But if you listen to the media, they'll kind of fan the flames of racial tension one way or another as it suits them. I don't mean to say that. I don't mean to say they aren't racial. There are.
Well, there will be over here as well. Don't get me wrong. British National Party, all that kind of stuff. It makes good news, isn't it? Anything that's negative. I mean, all news is negative. So anything that's negative, and we're attracted to it, aren't we? As humans, our brains are attracted to negative things. So we have papers over here, newspapers, which have got horrendous headlines, and especially with things like this coronavirus. One of the papers yesterday published something, and it's quite a respectable paper, but everything in it was stretched. All the truth was stretched to make it significantly worse. And then next to it, I think I put something out on Twitter, was something from the World Health Organization, which was a fact-based thing, and it just basically blew all those kind of lies out of the water. You know what I mean? Which is
I see.
Which is just what happens with that.
I wanted to touch on something else you mentioned about the name bit, the video I made called "Changing My Slave Name" and what have you. That was that was part of that's something that came about when I was on this whole, I still am in this whole self-actualization quest. I started to read about Black history in America, which eventually, in the American curriculum, a lot of what they teach you is Black race. It almost seems like Black history started with slavery. That's you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to go beyond that, and I ended up in Africa. I ended up in Egypt, what have you. But before that happened, one thing I realized is, if you ask most Black people where their origins are from, where their ancestry herald from, most of us really can't tell you, because that history, at least in America, has been well nigh obliterated because of slavery. A lot of us don't know what the original language of our ancestry were, or who they worshipped, and what their theologies were, and what have you. And part of that whole process was getting rid of the original names and giving the slaves the names of their captors, right, to show property. Right. And I talk about it in my video. And I'm from St. Lucia. I'm from a Caribbean island, and my name is Mclauraine. That doesn't quite seem, it seems a bit off, doesn't it? So, and there's a lot of that. Anyway, my point was, is that in my research, I came to realize that it's more than like that name at some point was associated with something to do with slavery. Perhaps an ancestor was owned or
Okay.
what have you, and the name was passed down. And I've been perpetuating it in my family. Yeah, I mean, I must have a dozen nieces and nephews at this point in time. We're passing this name off into the future, and I think that it's important for all people to connect to to ground base, to home, to whatever the ancestral story is, to connect with that. And part of that is language, part of that is theology, but also part of that are the names that we use, that we call each other, and what they mean. You know, I think that's really important. And my way of doing that most recently is considering a name change, which I've talked about in that video. If anyone's interested, they can watch that and they'll see what I'm talking about. But that's the sentiment behind that. It's connecting with my ancestry, which gives me, you know, when you personally, Tim, or myself, or anyone reads about the great achievements of those who came before them, it imparts a sense of confidence in the presence. At least to me, that was the experience I had when I read about certain men and women, their achievements and what they did. It made me feel that somewhere in my DNA was locked that the same will that was used to do those great things is still in me now, and that I myself can do great things in my time. However, you know, however insignificant they may seem to anyone else. It gave me a certain confidence, and I think that's important. And that's what that name change will remind me of. When you call me that, or my wife calls me that, it will remind me of that sentiment. And I think that's really powerful. For me, it is, and I think it's important.
Yeah, and that was an interesting video. I when I watched that, I can understand. I've read about this before a little bit, and I can understand why people are almost taking that power back to themselves and saying, I'm going to start this now. Now, of course, when you do that, if anyone that I work with came into work and said, hey, guys, I used to be called this, now I'm going to be called this, there's going to be questions with that. It's like, dude, what's up with your name? How do you, now, you're probably like me, we both would say, and a lot of people our age would say, look, I don't care about the opinion of others. You've spoken about this before. Of course, the truth is we are tribal people, and so we do have to care, else we'd be thrown out of the tribe. So we do have this inbuilt caring thing about. What you're doing is obviously a brave thing, or will be seen as a brave thing by others, because of course they might be more insecure than you, and they'd worry about what people would say or think about them if they change their name. Because we, of course, we'll project, don't we? We project onto other people. What do you think when you go to work and you say, hey, all my passports and my credit cards and my deeds to the house and everything now is going to, that is a job. That in itself is brave, because that's a work. Like, but you got to go in and talk to your team and your shift in work, and you got to say, guys, and you might have to explain yourself. Is that, I guess you're prepared to do that, and you've got a plan about that, and that's the easy part, is it?
Well, okay. So have you ever heard of Ralph Waldo Emerson?
Yeah, of course.
He's a famous essayist. And he wrote, my favorite, a lot of people who've heard of him, Self-Reliance, one of my favorites. And he talks about, to paraphrase, he said something of the sort that when you speak truthfully, when you really speak truthfully, you can assume to some degree that you're speaking for yourself and all others, because to some degree, people, they tend to be going through the same thing you are. Yeah. And when I first started to talk about that, I was very insecure about it. And I was certain that I was going to come across a lot of criticism. Now, I'm sure there are those who would like to criticize and who've just kept it to themselves. And that's fine. You know, I suppose I should thank them for doing me a favor in that regard. Or perhaps I should ask them to speak out, and perhaps they'll give me some perspective. But for the most part, Tim, surprisingly, I've gotten almost nothing but support. And this is from, like I said, a wide range of people, you know, black men and women, white men and women. They've either come up to me and said something at work. A lot of the people who I posted this to on my Facebook page, we work together. You know, we tend to friend each other so that we can communicate and what have you. And I've actually gotten a lot of support, man. But, you know, I mean, what are there, 500 people on my friends list, and maybe 20 of them have spoken to me. So what are the other 408 be thinking? Who knows? So it's going to start with I'm going to walk into work, and it's going to say on my uniform something different, and that's going to cause a lot of questions. But I'm just going to be as honest as I can about it. Perhaps not at length like we're going into right now. You know what I mean? I don't want to. Well, I'm glad you asked that. You got an hour? You know? Yeah. But I'm going to be honest with it about it, and let the chips fall where they may. I think I really feel not just in this, but in everything we do, we should really try to be genuine to ourselves and who we are. There's too much facade going on. And it's difficult, obviously, to be oneself because you open yourself up to criticism. And even Bruce Lee, I was watching an interview and Bruce Lee said that ultimately he felt that martial arts was about self-expression. And I thought that was very curious, because I thought it was about kicking ass. But Bruce Lee says it's about self-expression. And he said to express yourself honestly and openly, not lying to yourself, is very difficult. And you have to train your body and your mind to do that. And I thought that was very appropriate. And so taking the great teacher's advice, I'm really going to, like you said, while that coffee's on the pot and I'm putting on that uniform, I'm really going to set my teeth and my mind to just be honest about why I did what I did. And, just take whatever feedback I get as openly as I can, with as much strength as I can.
Yeah,
but I expect that people will have questions.
Of course they will, and it's not. They're not coming at it in a negative sense. Probably they're probably coming at it in a curious sense. Like, how come you change your name? And then you can say, well, look, let's have a coffee and sit down and talk about it. I think that's really interesting. Actually, one of the things that jumped out of me there was about doing the work. Like, there's work to be done, and we're men, and do the work for the work's sake. The fact that there's work to be done, I'm a big fan of that. So there's a pile of rocks at the end of my garden, and sometimes I go out there and I pick up every single rock and I move it to the other end of the garden. Just because I can, because it's building something in me. There's no reason to do it. It's like there's a whole bunch of rocks that need moving. Let's go move the rocks. But I feel you get something from that by putting that effort in. It's hard to describe what that is, but you feel like you're doing something that just needs. It doesn't even need to be done. You're just doing something. It's almost like we don't get to do something anymore. We're not tilling the fields, are we, or whatever. We're not. Our jobs are sitting behind a computer sometimes, or the very easy jobs. The men aren't being men anymore, and that's what I'm trying to get at. So I think what you're saying there is trying to, say that, just be honest. But if you're not honest about stuff, if you can't be honest about who you are, then there's an inherent lack of trust. When we look at each other, you can look at someone, you can tell whether they're lying. We all can. We can all tell whether they're putting the work in or not. It's just one of those things, and we all have times when we don't put the work in, of course.
Of course.
I was going to say something down here.
That's an excellent point that you made.
Well, you have to go and get yourself some rocks. Have you got a pull-up bar in your garden?
Absolutely.
Yeah, how do you do that? Do you like concrete in or something? I'd love that.
I went in there. I dug the hole, man. I went in there and I dug through. It was like
seriously.
At least
and what, you put concrete and a pole thing in there and everything?
Yeah, laid concrete and
I love
put
that.
The poles in there and I got some piping and I did the whole thing. Yeah.
Why do you not do that? I've always felt about doing that down in my garden. My wife's like, oh no, it's where the apple trees are. I'm like, I can't pull up on an apple tree. Right. I'm going to do one now. I'll send you a picture of it. One of the things
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Should we talk about, let's have a look. Oh yeah. So you're not eating meat. This is about being the best version of yourself. Some of this stuff really resonated with me because my wife and I say we're vegetarian carnivores. So we're primarily vegetarian, but occasionally we kind of leap on an antelope and eat it. But primarily, everything on our plate is like just this forest, this jungle of like leaves, and then there's like a little chicken bit in there. But you've stopped eating meat completely. Does that mean you're vegan or vegetarian, or what are you doing?
Well, as I understand it, vegans don't eat any animal products whatsoever. So they no honey and no milk and things like that.
Yeah, I guess pretty extreme. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be damned if I can't put some honey in my tea. So. Yeah, so I don't think I'll ever. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah. I surprised myself, but I don't think I'll be vegan. I'm vegetarian, which basically means I don't eat meat, but I can still partake of dairy and honey, things like that. But I don't eat animal flesh, so to speak. So, if you're interested as to the reason why, originally it's because at first I was a pescatarian. I just ate from the ocean, fish, whatever else. And even it's because I started to feel worn down. I started to feel, I didn't feel good. I did some research and I was really appalled at how it is, the processes by which some of the meat and some of the fish that I was eating made its way onto my plate, And so aside from health concerns, it just turned into a type of, I felt victimized in a way, And the alcohol has something to do with that same feeling as well. Yeah. So it's a dual purpose. It's for the betterment of my health. kind of a self-experiment, and that's important. We like to get on we get on YouTube and we Google stuff, and what will happen if I do this? But there are certain things that you have to do. You have to observe yourself and see what happens. And so it started off as self-experimentation, and as well as trying to take care of my health. And to be honest with you, Tim, since I've been doing that, it's been it's definitely been a couple of months. I haven't kept strict track, but I want to say I'm around 8 months or so. I do feel better, and almost none of the things I anticipated happened. I thought I was going to just lose a massive amount of weight and be a stick figure. I haven't. I'm still 205. I still have the same level of performance when I work out, more energy probably. I do feel. I'm not going to say that it's. I'm not a Superman all of a sudden, like some people claim, because they're, but I just feel better, and I feel as if I'm avoiding a certain level of victimization. And also, I don't want for things to suffer terribly for me to sustain myself. If I can avoid it, I try to, and that's part of the sentiment behind that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because a lot of people would say, mind and body, if we're killing things and then eating them, or they're being killed, and they're being treated badly and we're eating them, we're bringing on some of that karma onto ourselves. Now, I know, we can go into that if you want to. Was that part of it, or was it more to, when you talk about the victimization, are you saying that people are literally, I can talk about this with alcohol quite well, about the victimization. I'm very good at doing that. But when it comes to this, I'm a bit more unsighted. Is it to do with the processes, or the fact that maybe these animals had a lot of antibiotics in it that you think that you're consuming as well, and it's doing you damage and not allowing you to grow in the same way? Is it that kind of thing you're talking about in the process of delivering meat to your plate?
Yes, I think that the process is it renders the meat unhealthy, and those who develop the process and partake in it are aware of that. But I think that capital gains, money, is more important than our health to these people. I'm not going to say all of these companies, but certainly quite a few of them. I think they're more concerned with generating income as opposed to the public's health, and they will employ whatever means they can to do that. And I think when we participate in when we use their products, we're basically voting for them to keep on as they have been.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
That's what I mean by that. Yeah,
I was in Wichita. That's a strange town. There's not much going on there, but I was visiting an aircraft company there, and I was doing some work with them, and we'd all go out for lunch. And there's not much going on, like Monday afternoon. There's not much going on. It's hard to find something cafe open, but you can always find your staple American things, your Subway, and you've got loads of lunch options. But it's really hard, I found, going out with all these American pilots and engineers, and we'd all try. They'd all go, let's go here, let's do this one, let's do that one. When you walk in there, it's difficult to eat healthy for lunch, and you don't have to pay much money to get a lot of food, of food, and it's got your refills of your Coke and everything, and your big buckets. I'm not saying the UK isn't becoming like that or isn't like that in certain places, but I found it really hard to find somewhere that, my question I've written down here is, how easy is it for you to be a vegetarian in America? I mean, do you struggle to find things? You have a special place you shop?
It's, to answer your question, it's not easy, man. And you could be a junk food vegetarian, eat chips and what have you. But if you're trying to do it in earnest and be healthy about it, it's very difficult, man. It's very difficult. Sometimes I just stop at the side of the road and eat the grass I find.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
that's what ox do. They're massive. Yeah.
Right. I think it works for them. No, it's extremely difficult, and the more strict I am with myself about it, the more I find that I'm eating at home and meal prepping and doing things like that.
Meal prepping, yeah, I get that. That's what I wanted to get at. Is it a meal prep? Because this is actually a bit of a story for men, then, isn't it? About this is what we do during the first bit of the day. Is we've got to plan that day, we've got to plan that week, you've got to plan that month, that year. And if you don't, you're just going to walk into it, and other people are going to control. They're going to control you because it's natural. You're going to do whatever they want. You're going to end up wherever they want you to be. Whereas if we start prepping things, then we know that we're responsible for our own future. And I guess that's quite a good analogy there. If you're having to prep your food, because if you didn't, it's very easy to reach out and to grab that Subway and all that bread and everything else and stuff that in. Absolutely. And then you wonder, it's bad. Because obviously what we eat is what we think. It all goes in the same place, isn't it? We are what we eat. So that's really interesting. There's a saying
that there's a saying, if you don't have a plan, then you will most certainly become part of someone else's plan.
Yes.
And so
I couldn't remember that one, but you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I was trying. I can't remember who said that, but it's probably come from something. It's probably like Jordan Peterson's probably said that to me at some point. When you,
right. So
when
that's
we
part of
talk,
the prepping.
when we talk about, because this brings me on then to like, I suppose black musicians or the rap industry, I guess, whatever it might be, or whatever that might be. And something you said was when Drake or I think you mentioned another guy as well, they go around giving out money to people, and you're like, don't give out money to people. And also there's like a responsibility these people kind of have, really being in that limelight. If they were to use that for, rapping about, or the music was about education and about striving, and is that the sort of thing? One of your videos did actually go into that. Is that something?
Yeah. Well, one thing's for certain, man. Talking about education and self-empowerment is not very profitable in America. I don't know about the UK, but it's not. That's a sure way to get yourself less listeners around here. And so, these guys, like you said, they're very powerful. If you speak, and I think you mentioned you have about 5,000 people who subscribe to your podcast.
Yeah, about that. Yeah, it's not great.
Right. It'll be 5,001 after today.
You know it.
So, that's powerful. You're powerful, and it matters what you say, because there are 5,000 people listening. And then if you imagine a guy like Drake, there's millions. He sells, what is a platinum record? 1 million sales?
Yeah, I guess so.
Whether people are paying attention or not, he's speaking directly to their conscious and subconscious. And for me, it would be a much better use of that power to educate people and empower them, than to just give them money. If you just give a person something and they don't understand how to use it or invest it, or by what means they can use it to make their lives better, they'll just disperse it. It will be like handing them so much dust, and they'll just throw it into the wind eventually. We hear about people who win the lottery or come into lump sums of money who after a few years are broke all over again.
Yeah.
It's not because they didn't have the means, it's because they didn't have the knowledge.
Yeah.
And so these powerful people, really, I personally think they should use their power and influence to educate and to broaden the horizons of their listeners, as opposed to just, after they've made so much money, giving a bit of it away. A lot of the athletes and today's in America are guilty of that. And we, the public, we're not holding them accountable for that. We're letting them make lyrics that talk about, oh, I've got so many cars and I've got so many bitches and I've got this amount of money. And I mean, okay, that's great, buddy. How does that better my life? By knowing about all the great things that you have. Teach me something useful instead.
Would you have said this, though, when you were in your early 20s? I mean, listening to that kind of music. I mean, you weren't enlightened like you are now. You'd have been there like the rest of us, being there, buying the albums and singing the lyrics and everything else. At what point do we? I mean, we don't blame the young, of course. I mean, don't get me wrong; they don't know anything. They're young. They haven't been exposed to stuff yet. I mean, they're not out of education or anything. But at what point do we expect them to be able to, or are we responsible for that development that they're not getting? Because it doesn't happen in our education system either. One thing that doesn't happen either is financial education. People really don't understand about like mortgages and everything else, and it's criminal, really. They can learn all this stuff that, I do apologize, all this stuff that isn't really relevant, but they don't really have anything to do with the stuff that really matters.
I think that we definitely have to answer your question. No, when I was in my 20s, I was just bumping the beats like everybody else. Man, or the beats like, that's, I'm not sure exactly when I came online to realize that, these guys are taking advantage of us, but it had to do with that whole self-realization that we spoke about earlier. As I started to think, and I saw these very intelligent men with big audiences who were using it constructively to teach people and empower people. Sometimes, a detriment to their own reputation, because a lot of people organizations would try to defame certain amongst them. They would do it anyway. And I started to think, well, why isn't that happening now? Why aren't any of these popular guys, Drake and Young Jeezy and all these other rappers, why aren't they doing the same thing? They seem to be more concerned of their own livelihoods than anything else. So it's just something that happened gradually, to be honest with you.
Is that not America? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but is that not what America portrays itself like that? This whole wealth generation, and it seems very easy to make a lot of money, but also to lose a lot of money. And there seems to be this whole thing that you see, whether it's either on social or in the news or something, people almost celebrating wealth in a way that doesn't really happen. I'm not saying in Europe so much. Well, maybe I am saying in Europe. It seems to be a bit of an American thing, people having all the athletes and stuff celebrating wealth and everything. I don't know whether do you see that in America? I mean, is that the main thing? Is that what everyone in school wants? They want to be a YouTuber and stuff, do they?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that is honestly, that is very American, honestly, to have as much and to earn as much as possible, because to some degree we associate self-worth with how much money and possessions that we have. That's something we're taught at an early age, and so it's become part of the American ethos to do that. So yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think in most developed countries, I've traveled to quite a few, I think that's a very common ethos to come across.
I think it can be, but then of course, where does it ever stop? That's the argument that we have, is you don't need much to live comfortably. I mean, there's a figure, I think it's about $70,000 US. If you hit that figure, earning more than that, it doesn't really give you any more happiness at all. If anything, it can give you a lot more stress because you're in the office longer or whatever, or you're taking those calls at 3 a.m. from someone who's unhappy, and Sunday morning you've got to react to it. So there comes a point where I think we see over here, especially now I'm in my mid-40s and I left the military, that I don't need to earn a huge amount. I don't need to blow up on YouTube. I don't need to do this. I can sit with my audience. I can talk to people, run a few courses. I can do some directing work for a company I work with. I don't need to go and change the world in a massive way. I don't need to thrust like that because I'm quite content about who I am and the message that I'm putting out. It just seems, for me, when I look into America, that there is this huge, there's a divide of wealth, of course, in the UK as well. Although we are statistically, the whole Western world is closer, apparently, in wealth disparity than it ever has been. And you wouldn't think so, would you? But we are, apparently. So there's closer between the impoverished and the wealthy. But one of the things you said here as well, you said the system seems to be set up to keep people, or to keep poor people, or to manage the resources, basically. So it's almost, in a way, to keep the poor where they are and not to give them the education. That's something that came out there. I suppose if you were to give them the education, would you then not have like factory workers and manual laborers and things like that? Is that the issue?
Right. Well, what do you have the actual quote written down? What I said?
Yeah. So it came from the video. No, the quote just says, it seems that the system is set up to keep people poor.
Okay.
And I we were talking about how black artists don't encourage the building of wealth. They encourage the celebration of wealth, as it were.
Well, yes. Yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting that. Okay, so yeah, I don't think the priority in America is to educate the public on how to develop, how to build a base of wealth. I don't think that's the priority. It's to teach us to spend and to associate things, like I said, with our sense of self-worth. Even, for instance, you get married here, most women will encourage you to spend quite a bit of money. I hate to speak for women.
No, I know. I'm with you. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But there's this huge ad campaign here about associating the love you feel for your significant other with a shiny rock that costs more than a car. A lot of times, we become very materialistic, and a lot of what we're taught is to perpetuate that system of materialism. And I think it's profitable to those of us who are well off that people keep on spending money unnecessarily and getting themselves in debt. If you had a fire setting business, but at the same time you encourage people to conserve trees, you probably wouldn't come off too well on the other end. You've got to encourage people to chop as many trees down and burn as much wood as possible to keep your fire growing. And that's kind of an analogy for what's going on here and what the priority is in terms of educating the public.
Oh, you're right.
Spend. Yeah.
If I had a tire shop, whatever, I'd be throwing nails down the road. You know what I mean? It's everywhere.
Exactly.
I'd have a tire shop and a nail shop. You know what I mean? You're going to help out both these things.
Yeah. Exactly.
I was going to talk to you a little bit about anxiety, because one of your first videos back in 2015 talked about anxiety, went on for about 15 minutes, and it was interesting because, of course, you would have been in the military. You would have been exposing yourself to say, I've got an anxiety issue. I wrote about mental health back in about the same year, about 2015. In fact, I wrote about what the hell was the essay called now? I have to Google my own essays now because it's much easier to find them like that. When fighter pilots go bad. And I got criticism for that, by the way. People are saying, mental health doesn't mean you're bad. I'm like, I know, but it means it's a catchy headline that you're going to read. And then hopefully you're going to read the essay. And I've got to sensationalize that a little bit. So you read the essay. But it was all about, me entering a bit of a spin, which is why I run a course now called the Spin Recovery Program. Entering this whole thing with work where, the boss is coming in and saying, right, Tim, I was one of the flight commanders there. There's one of three guys. And we're running about 80 pilots. And he would come in the morning and saying, right, Tim, your priority for the day is this. This is what you have to get done. I'd be like, all right, boss, I'll go and cancel some trips then, whatever. And he goes, don't cancel the trips, just get it done. So then eventually he comes back in 10 minutes later and says, and your second priority for the day is this. And you're like, awesome. I can't have two priorities. So it got to a point where...
Well, Tim, that's what you get for being good at your job.
Yeah, well, that's the truth right there, isn't it? Because this is why this is what happens to people that, can-do people. Unfortunately, you take it on. There's a great book by a guy called Tim Cantifer called Depressive Illness, Curse of the Strong. And his argument, he's a psychiatrist, I believe, he says that, I don't think this is a generalization, but it probably is. He says that people that get depressed are very strong people. Weak people, they get to a point where people are loading them up and they're like, I can't do it. Sorry, I can't. I'm going to go home because I can't do it. Strong people, they take it and they're like, yeah, give me that. I'll do that as well. Yeah, I'll do that. And you load up until eventually it breaks and then it drops. And that's your depression. That's your body saying, you know what? I'm going to do this to your mind now. I'm going to put your mind in hibernation right now, which is guys saying is what depression is. I'm going to hibernate your mind to stop you doing these things. Because if I let you do them even further, it's going to damage you even more.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a short book, but it's an interesting book. Depressive Illness, Curse of the Strong. And he then talks about how he rehabilitates these people. And I realized that I was flying jets and I was seeing a psychiatrist. And the third time I saw this second time I saw him. I saw him the first time and I'm sitting in this room waiting to go in next to guys missing limbs and everything, come back from Afghanistan. And I'm like, why the hell am I here? There's young guys here without limbs. It's kind of embarrassing, but it gets you off the squadron, right? It lets you just get away from the squadron for the day. And that was enough. And the second time I went, he said to me, look, if you come back again, I'm going to have to stop you flying. So, of course, I never went back again, did I? I just carried on flying like this.
What a thing to say, right?
Yeah, what the hell am I doing? I wrote an essay about it. I got my own help outside of the service in the end and took it real slow and just downgraded all the tasks I was doing and realized that's the time you reject that run for promotion. You don't want to do it anymore. You just have to stop it. And I managed to drag myself out of there, but that was quite an interesting one. What else do we cover? Oh yeah, go on. Okay, so one thing I did want to speak to you, I don't want to run this forever and everything, but it's fascinating. How a tattoo, the negativity behind your tattoo drove the positivity that got you to buy a house. That's a message. That's like your message. You want to use that because this is the great thing. Because people do things that they don't want to do and they're embarrassed about them, and they end up in this kind of this whirlpool, don't they, of negativity. But you use that for something. You say, I'm not happy about this. But
wow, man, that's a great. I'm glad you brought that up, and it's actually kind of a hard thing to explain. But the house came about because of tattoo regret. I got a tattoo. Now I have quite a few, and I won't say which one because I don't want, you know what I mean? I don't want to insult the artist, but I used that regret and the pain I felt from that to fuel my motivation to buy my home. Motivation is something that's finite. At least in my experience, you run out sometimes. It's a cycle.
Yeah.
But pain and regret sometimes can be so all-consuming. It's actually a good motivator for change. If you could tap into it, you can do incredible things. Tim, it's been about, I'm approaching 300 days being free of alcohol, and that is because I used regret. I used the painful experience. And so this is how I do that. I made a video about it. I'll try to condense it. It's basically, you take something that's happened to you, something traumatic. Honestly, the worse, the better. Something that when you think about it, you might wince a little bit because it's left a mark,
Yeah.
And you say to yourself, because this thing happened to me, because I lost that friend, or I hurt myself in a way I can't heal from physically. Maybe I lost a hand in an accident or something of that sort.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you take the sentiment, the feeling, the regret, and the pain, you say, I'm going to quit a bad habit, or I'm going to do something positive in my life. I'm going to get this college degree. I'm going to buy this house. I'm going to invest in this property. You're going to do something. And the reason why I'm going to do this good thing is because of the pain from this past event. I'm
Okay.
going to take that pain and justify it by doing something positive in the present for myself. And so you tie the two events. It becomes, whenever you achieve the good thing, it becomes that you achieved it because you were hurt in the past. You've used it as a type of fuel. And it can be done with anything for any reason. They don't have to be linked. You just justify your pain by doing something good for yourself, and you use it. The motive. Now, this is the account where accountability comes in. You say to yourself, if I don't achieve this thing that I've set out to do, then I went through that pain for nothing. I felt that hurt for nothing. That regret I'm carrying around is for no reason. You use that. And so I must achieve whatever that thing is, because by doing so, I will justify the hurt. And that's honestly, as many times I've quit for a month and started drinking again. I've quit for 2 and 3 months. I made it once to day 99 and drank on the day 100. Like legitimately, man, not bullshitting you. So yeah, seriously.
I get that.
So what got me over the hump is actually using that technique, and that's what got me over it.
So tying that back into anxiety then, because obviously we know that alcohol being a depressant does fuel anxiety. So we can drink and then we just end up being, and we've all been there, I've been there as well, where you got to stop and you say, look, why am I either so depressed or why am I so anxious? What's the constant thing I'm doing in my life? You say, well, my diet's pretty good. I'm exercising. Oh, I'm slamming beers. That's what I'm doing. That's the constant right there. So it's the beers, and you do research in it. And one of the good books I recommend people that I do coaching with is Alcohol Explained. I can't remember the guy's name now. I just had the book around. If you go Alcohol Explained, you'll find it. It's a British guy. He used to be a paratrooper, I think he was. And he's a really good book. He simply lays it out, but he does talk about, the great thing about it, he's not judgmental. He was moderating for a long time himself. And then he was like, why am I moderating? It starts off with, why am I having an issue with alcohol? And he's like, well, why am I, okay, I'll do something about it. I'll moderate. And then he's like, well, why am I moderating? And then eventually he was like, I'm going to get rid of this completely because it's giving me anxiety and it's obviously, not making my sleep great. I'm just going to find out the guy's name because literally I recommend this all the time. And that's quite an interesting one, but that's about anxiety. So when you were talking about anxiety back in 2015, I'm assuming you were still drinking back then. And then do you think that was fueling your anxiety? Was that a big factor of it? Or was it the fact that you've been in the military 5 years, you were unsure of your identity, you're still trying to work up promotion, be a shift leader, that kind of stuff?
Right. It definitely didn't help, Tim, but I think ultimately, now that I've stopped drinking for a while and I still have anxiety, I think ultimately it comes from a lack of confidence in my ability.
Okay.
I think that's the fuel. I'm scared that I can't do this, or if I do this, I'll mess it up. Or even before we started this podcast here, when you said that you were about to go, that you're about to record, my heart started to pump, like,
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We all get it.
Yeah, right. And so it's from a lack of confidence. And the best tool that I've found for my anxiety, and the funny thing about that, to touch on it, is that most people look at me, and I'm a pretty tall guy. I've been told I could be imposing in person and whatnot, and I seem very sure of myself, even though I'm not necessarily trying to project that. People tend to pick that up from me, and the truth is, every day to some degree, I deal with an immense amount of self-doubt and fear, and it may be the only difference is that I don't give into it. I let myself mess up if I have to, but I go and do the thing that I'm afraid to do. And that's ultimately the greatest tool I've found against that fear and that anxiety and that lack of confidence, is to go and do the thing that you're afraid to do, which is obviously a lot easier to say than to do. But the more you do it, the softer that whisper of fear is going to become. Yeah,
I use some cards down here.
Okay.
And they're from a company called Best Self. If people want it, I use these, and it's not just for me; it's for the people I coach. And they're courage over comfort cards. Now, what we do on every session we do is the guys are able to pick out whichever card they want, and this is to challenge yourself. This is to get you doing.
What do they call it, Tim?
Oh, sorry. Courage over comfort. There we go. Best self. It's a company. Okay. They're based in the States. You can pick these up pretty cheap, and they're broken down into like either relationships, random, personal development. What is this one here? Learning or health. So right now you could pick one of these. You could say, hey, I want a health challenge. Go, all right, yeah, of course you do. I'll pick you a random or experience as well. I'm going to pick you a health challenge. And this health thing says here, it says, take a fitness class. So you'd have to go out and literally go and join a spin class for a day.
Jeez, what a terrifying deck of cards.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, personal development, here's one. You got to write your eulogy. There you go. So my guys, they can choose one of these. They get one joker. So if they choose one, they go, oh, Tim, I'll have a relationship card this week. I'm like, all right, have a relationship card. Okay. They pick this card and it says, write a love note to your partner. They're like, dude, I don't want to do that. So they're allowed to pick another one. That second one, they've got to do it. Right. And they have to do it. And this week they are doing some. This week I've got
accountability.
Yeah, it's all about that. I think it starts with integrity, doesn't it? It starts with that doing the right thing even though no one's watching. Yeah, doing the right. That's integrity. Mm-hmm. So I build initially what we do on the course is we build that integrity over about 4 weeks. Then we start group accountability through the habit forming page part of it. So that if, for example, you say, you know, I want to work out for 30 minutes every single day, I say, okay, I'll be your accountability partner. And what that means is I'm responsible for you doing that. So at 5 in the morning, I'm going to send you a text. I'm going to be like, get out of bed. What's going on? You know, you got to be doing your workout. And if you don't do it, it's my fault. So I'm accountable to you and the rest of the class. It's quite a powerful thing for men because we realize
that's awesome.
We need each other to be able to achieve these tasks. So I'm a big fan of these challenges and as you say, you know, doing something that makes you uncomfortable. And we soon realize that actually it's not that bad. Once we do it, it's doable, right? It's all right.
Right.
It's not bad at all. So that was the interesting thing on there. I was gonna. I don't think I'm really gonna try and cover too much else. Did you? So you read some Jordan Peterson stuff, did you? Because you know, he's at the moment he's recovering, isn't he, from benzodol? I think it's one of these drugs that you guys have, the Canadians have. But some of his lectures that he used to give, you can watch those. And I think you can get a lot out of that. You know, I used to watch a few of those and get quite a few interesting things. It's like it's that teacher we never had. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
it's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore Jordan if you're on the path of personal development. You're going to come across him at some point.
I actually was on holiday recently with a guy. I was skiing in Europe, and this guy was talking all this stuff like we are. And I said, "Oh, did you see this Jordan Peterson thing?" And he was like, "Who's Jordan Peterson?" I'm like, "Dude, seriously, what are you talking about?" I thought you would have read all this. He's like, "I've never heard of the guy." I'm like, and that's amazing that in this day of celebrity, there's still someone that's that famous that we still can't hear about. I mean, or we haven't heard about. I find it incredible. How's the piano playing coming on?
It's coming along pretty good, actually. I just put up a short video yesterday, and to be honest with you, man, I've been playing. As long as I've been playing, I should be a lot better. You know, I feel to myself first things like, man, you suck, guy.
Yeah, you're doing that thing. That's what you're doing now, isn't it? You're doing that confidence.
Yeah,
I should be better. You shouldn't. You have to get rid of that word "should" out of the whole language. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, a friend made a good point. He said that, well, because you've been doing something for a long time doesn't mean you've been practicing for a long time. So
yeah,
it's coming along well. It's something I do for the love of it. It's something I put a lot of energy into that earnestly, only because it brings me enjoyment. At the same time, I feel like I'm being constructive, you know?
Yeah.
And I haven't really tried to do anything major with it. I think I have a video that has on another channel I have that has close to 30,000 views, and that's about as big as my piano playing has ever gotten. That video.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually I have an audience of one, just my wife sitting on the couch, and I play something, and she gives me the usual, "That was great, honey."
Yeah.
And that's about it, and I satisfy myself with that. But I think that's something men should do. It's kind of, you know, if you've ever read about samurais, for instance, you know, back in the day, you have these warriors, fearless warriors and what have you, but they also practice tea ceremonies and poetry and flower arrangement. You know, they balance their masculine energy by doing things like that. So I think all of us men, we should try to do something like that. And so that's what the piano playing is for me. It's balancing that aggressive, masculine, smash, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve energy with something that's artistic and beautiful. You know.
Yeah, for the sake of it. And you don't even need to celebrate that. I mean, I've got this book, Kaizen, here, which talks about incremental change and process. And there's another one called
Awesome.
Japanesey, is it? Which talks about all those things like tea ceremonies. I'll get I'll put the links in the description for this. It talks about all those things about what the Japanese do, like raking gravel and all the tea and everything else. And practicing for practicing's sake, as opposed to trying to do something really well and then, you know, smash up on the internet so people are going to applaud you. That's not what it's about. It's about getting the doing it or doing the work, as I said earlier, you know, getting it done almost like for a therapeutic type thing that we should be doing a lot more of, which is really cool. So and you mentioned other channels.
Do you have something like that? Do you have something like that, Tim, that you do?
Well, I don't know. You see the rowing machine down here, this pain machine. This is a water rower. Yeah. And it's good.
Okay.
My wife wouldn't allow a Concept 2 in the house. So we have a water rower. So I'm the chairman of a rowing club. And so I run that in the UK. And it's the second biggest regatta next to Henley-on-Thames, which is probably the biggest rowing regatta in the world. So
really?
We do a lot of rowing. Rowing is very therapeutic. And it's not just because rowing, if you get in a rowing boat and you haven't rowed before, you just end up upside down in the water straight away like that.
Okay.
There's so much that goes into it. There's so much balance and poise and technique. It's all about legs. Everyone thinks it's arms. It's not. So it takes you, years to learn to be a decent rower. And you go up and down the river, early in the morning, and it's a beautiful thing. So I do that. I take watches apart as well. I'm into, horology, so I really get in my zone. I put some like Dre on or something. I'm massive into my West Coast, and then that's blaring there. And then I don't know why. All the days of Snoop and Easy, all this kind of stuff, So I put that on. Right. The old school, the 90s.
Yeah, right.
Then,
okay.
When it was still half decent, and then before it got abused and sensationalized. And then I take my watches apart and I clean all the bits, and then I oil them. Oiling itself that's a very much like bonsai tree cutting, oiling a watch, and then I try and get them running and the regulating of the beat and everything else. And so that's my things. But I'm always on the lookout for things that I haven't found yet. That I'm thinking about archery next. Maybe that's apparently quite. That's
so cool. I would love to do archery. That is such a cool discipline.
Yeah, there's a lot in it. Apparently, there's a lot of. We don't realize. We think it's just doing this, but apparently it's not. There's a lot to do with different types of bow and the strings and the arrows and anything.
I tried before actually, and we thought we killed someone for a minute there because we shot an arrow over my friend's fence out into the street. So there's quite a bit that goes into it.
That's terrorism. That's completely different. That's it. It's urban terrorism. So let's just reiterate your channels for people then. So your name is Miki Mclauraine, and you've got Son of Sotep as your main one, is it? But you talk about other ones like Facebook and another channel, is it? Or
on Facebook you could just put my name in, Miki Mclauraine. Should I spell that? Or?
Spell it. Go on. I'll put it up in the credits anyway. But
okay, my first name is Miki, and last is Mclauraine. And that's just kind of a social. There's nothing I'm doing in particular on there. I've kind of got my hands in a lot of things. My podcast is also going to be Son of Sotep. I got the first episode pending right now, but I haven't gotten the approval notice yet. So whenever it comes up, that's what it will be called. Okay. I haven't. There's an older YouTube channel, but I'm kind of phasing that one out. I don't really pay much attention to it anymore. So, but if anyone is interested in looking that one up, it's called More McGill, which is MORMEGIL, and the number 2, More McGill 2. Which are you into Tolkien at all?
Tolkien.
Yeah, the author.
I haven't actually read too many. No, why? Were you into that? Were you?
Okay. Oh well, that's what Mormigil is from. It actually means black sword. So
no, I didn't know that. Yeah. I haven't got into that rabbit hole myself yet. I need to. That hole. Is that Lord of the Rings and stuff like that? Is it?
It's a deep hole. I caution you.
Yeah, really.
You don't seem like you have a lot of time, Tim. So I would advise against it.
All right, great stuff. Well, look, it's been brilliant to talk to you. Anyway, I'm sure people will put on to, and I'm going to put your links for these things if I can. I'll go and find a Facebook link and your YouTube link and your podcast link. What are you using for your podcast host? Who are you using? Acast? Is it Acast or
SoundCloud?
SoundCloud, yeah, SoundCloud's a great place to put it out. There's so many, isn't there? But as long as people know where to kind of go, and then they can search on that thing, and they'll find you. But look, it's been brilliant to talk to you. I'm sure you'll want to come on again. And when you're massively famous and you're rocking the world out there, then I'll be like, hey, remember me when we were small?
Okay.
And I'll come on your podcast. All right, that's great.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be
great. I like that.
Well, it's been great to talk to you. I really appreciate it, and I'll get this out, and I'll send you some links over. Okay.
Absolutely, Tim. Thank you for having me on. I really, really appreciate it, man.
No worries.
Had a good time.
Yeah, and you, buddy.
Awesome.
Okay. See you soon.